This story is titled, While My Stepbrother Received Everything Growing Up, I've been working since I was a teenager to provide for myself and assist my family. But when my wealthy uncle offered me an elite position, my parents finally realized their mistake. Sup, Reddit? I can't believe I'm actually typing this out, but here we are. This story is going to be incredibly long, but trust me when I say the ending is absolutely worth it. I've been reading everyone else's stories about terrible families and revenge for years, never thinking I'd have one worth sharing myself. Boy, was I wrong about that. My name is Derek, and I'm 26 years old. To understand how everything unfolded, I need to give you some background about the family I grew up in. We were your typical middle-class suburban family that was completely obsessed with appearances and status. Picture a cookie cutter. McMansion in a planned community, leased luxury cars in the driveway that we couldn't actually afford, and parents who measured their entire self-worth by how much they could brag to the neighbors about their successful lifestyle. My mother, Patricia, was one of those women who put on this sickeningly sweet facade for everyone outside our home. She volunteered at church every Sunday, not because she was particularly religious, but because it gave her a platform where people would constantly tell her what a wonderful mother and upstanding member of the community she was. She lived for those compliments and the social validation that came with being seen as the perfect suburban mom. My father, Richard, sold insurance for a living but somehow convinced himself that this made him some kind of business mogul. He drove around in a leased BMW that he couldn't afford, acting like he was closing million-dollar deals instead of trying to convince middle-aged accountants to buy term life insurance policies. He wore these cheap suits from Josork, a bank that he genuinely believed looked expensive and sophisticated. The man had absolutely no self-awareness about how transparent his desperation for status really was. Then there was my younger brother Tyler, who was 3 years younger than me and might as well have been the second coming of Christ according to my parents. This kid was completely average at soccer, and I mean genuinely mediocre. Yet you'd think he was being scouted by professional teams based on how my parents carried on about his natural athletic talent and incredible potential. He got B's and C's in school, which somehow became evidence of his brilliant mind that just needed the right environment to flourish. The way they talked about him, you'd think he was simultaneously headed for the World Cup and Harvard University. Meanwhile, I was just sort of there. I was the practice kid, the rough draft they had before Tyler came along and they figured out how parenting was supposed to work. I was the trial run where they made all their mistakes before having their real child. The favoritism wasn't even subtle. They didn't even attempt to hide their preferences. I have vivid memories from when I was probably 8 or 9 years old of Tyler getting piles of new toys, while I was told that Christmas was about giving, not receiving, when I asked why my pile of presents was so much smaller. When I turned 15, I got a part-time job bagging groceries at the local Publix and saved up for months to buy something I really wanted. I had found this used guitar at a pawn shop for $95, which represented basically my entire net worth at the time. I'd been teaching myself to play using YouTube videos and was actually getting pretty decent at it. Music had become my escape from all the family drama and tension at home. The one thing that was entirely mine. One day I came home from school and found Tyler in the living room playing around with my guitar. He wasn't even playing it well, just strumming random chords and acting like he was some kind of rock star performing for an imaginary audience. When I politely asked for my guitar back, my mother gave me this deeply disappointed look and said, "Sharing is caring, Derek. Tyler might be musically gifted too, and we need to nurture that potential." 2 days later, I discovered my guitar in the garage with a completely cracked neck. Tyler had accidentally knocked it over while playing around with it, and the damage was beyond repair. Instead of making him replace it or even apologize for destroying something that had cost me months of work to afford, my father looked at me with this expression of mild annoyance and said, "Maybe this will teach you to take better care of your things." That guitar represented $95 down the drain. More money than I'd ever had in my life at that point, and they treated it like I had somehow been irresponsible. That incident with the guitar was basically my entire childhood in a nutshell. Whenever Tyler broke something that belonged to me, somehow it became my fault for not putting it away safely enough. When Tyler needed or wanted something, well, Derek didn't really need his thing anyway, did he? When we moved to a bigger house and Tyler wanted the larger bedroom, I was told that Derek should be happy to help his little brother feel comfortable in his new space. The pattern was so consistent and obvious that even as a kid, I knew exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. The birthday situation still makes my blood boil when I think about it, even all these years later. For Tyler's 16th birthday, my parents threw him this absolutely massive celebration. They rented out the entire community center, hired a professional DJ, and invited probably 50 kids from his school. There was a chocolate fountain, an actual chocolate fountain at a 16-year-old's birthday party. They surprised him with a used Honda Civic that they'd somehow managed to put a giant red bow on top of, making it look like something out of a car commercial. My mother went completely overboard with the social media documentation, posting what felt like 200 pictures on Facebook with captions like, "Our baby is growing up, so proud of our amazing son," and "Look at this incredible young man we've raised." The comment section was filled with neighbors and family friends gushing about what wonderful parents they were and how lucky Tyler was to have such a supportive family. My 16th birthday, by contrast, was a completely different experience. They took me to Olive Garden, just the four of us, and my father complained about the menu prices the entire time we were there. When the waiter brought out the complimentary dessert with a single candle in it, Tyler spent the entire time monopolizing the conversation by talking about his upcoming soccer tryouts, while my parents hung on every single word like he was discussing his plans to cure cancer. I think I received maybe $50 in cash and a generic gift card to Best Buy. No party, no friends invited, no car, and definitely no Facebook posts celebrating my milestone birthday. But what really messed with my head was how differently they talked about Tyler and me when other people were around. At family gatherings, my mother would corner anyone who would listen and go on and on about Tyler's latest soccer goal, how he was such a natural leader, and how popular he was becoming at school. When relatives inevitably asked about me, she would get this tight, artificial smile and say something vague like, "Derek's still finding his way," or "He's more of a late bloomer, you know?" It was like I was some kind of charity case they were stuck with, rather than their actual son. I started spending more and more time away from home during my high school years, picking up extra shifts at the grocery store and staying late at school for random clubs I didn't even care about. Anything was better than being in that house where I felt like a stranger who had overstayed his welcome. By the time I graduated high school, I was basically invisible to them. They showed up to the graduation ceremony, but spent the entire time talking about Tyler's upcoming senior year and how excited they were for his college recruitment meetings. I honestly don't think they even clapped when my name was called to receive my diploma. The message couldn't have been clearer if they had tattooed it on my forehead. Tyler was the investment, the child worth putting time and money into. I was just an expense they had to deal with until I turned 18 and became someone else's problem. After graduation, Tyler got accepted to Central University on a partial soccer scholarship. It wasn't even a full ride, just partial financial aid. But you would have thought he'd been recruited by Manchester United based on my parents' reaction. They threw him this massive graduation party that was even bigger than the 16th birthday celebration I never had. They invited probably 100 people, had the whole thing catered by a local restaurant, and even rented one of those inflatable obstacle courses like it was a festival. My mother created an entire Facebook album with probably 80 pictures titled "Our Scholar Athlete," and the comments section was absolutely nauseating. "You must be so proud. What an amazing young man. He's going to do such great things in life," my mother replied to every single comment, with these long paragraphs detailing Tyler's accomplishments and future potential, like she was writing his biography for the Hall of Fame. Meanwhile, I quietly enrolled at Ocean View Community College because that was literally all I could afford on my own. I filled out all the paperwork myself, figured out the financial aid process myself, and registered for classes completely by myself. I don't think my parents even knew I was planning to continue my education until they accidentally saw the enrollment paperwork sitting on the kitchen counter. That paperwork sat there untouched for about 2 weeks before my mother eventually used it as scrap paper for her grocery shopping list. My schedule once I started community college was absolutely brutal, but it was the only way I could make everything work financially. I managed to get a full-time job at Pep Boys, working the early shift from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., doing oil changes, replacing car batteries, and helping completely clueless suburban dads figure out why their lawnmowers wouldn't start after sitting in the garage all winter. The work was dirty and physically exhausting, but it paid $9 an hour, which was actually decent money for someone with no real experience or specialized skills. In the evenings, I had a second job delivering food for Tony's Pizza from 5 p.m. until midnight. The owner was this gruff old guy named Steve who gave me this absolutely beat-up 2001 Honda Civic that looked like it had been through several wars. The muffler was so loud that you could hear me coming from 3 blocks away, the air conditioning had been broken for years, and there was this mysterious stain on the passenger seat that smelled like old milk no matter what cleaning products I used to try to get rid of it. But the car ran most of the time and gas was relatively cheap back then, so I couldn't really complain. Between my two jobs, I was pulling in maybe $380 a week before taxes, which sounds like decent money until you factor in gas, car insurance, textbooks, and food. After all those expenses, I was lucky to have $60 left over each week for anything else. It wasn't exactly living the dream, but it was honest work, and nobody could say I wasn't trying my absolute hardest to make something of myself. The real problem came when I needed to figure out my housing situation. My parents made it very clear that now that I was 18 years old, I needed to start acting like an adult and contribute financially to the household if I wanted to keep living at home. They wanted $250 a month for rent, plus my share of groceries and utilities. On my income, that would have left me with maybe $40 a week for absolutely everything else in my life. I tried to negotiate with them, explaining that I was going to school full-time and working two jobs simultaneously, and asked if we could work out some kind of arrangement that wouldn't completely drain my finances. My father just shrugged his shoulders and said, "Welcome to the real world, son. Nobody gets a free ride in life." This was especially rich considering that Tyler's college education was costing them around $12,000 a year, even after his partial scholarship. Plus, they were paying for his meal plan, his dorm room, all his textbooks, and even sending him spending money for emergencies and social activities. But sure, I was the one looking for a free ride. So I made the difficult decision to move out, even though I couldn't afford an apartment, couldn't afford a room in a shared house, and really couldn't afford anything that resembled normal housing. I started sleeping in my car behind the 24-hour Target on the edge of town, figuring it was relatively safe since it was well lit, and there were always people around, so nobody would mess with me or try to break into my car. Sleeping in that Honda Civic was absolute misery night after night. I'm 6'2", and trying to fold myself into the back seat of a compact car every single night was like some kind of medieval torture device. I would wake up every morning with severe cricks in my neck, pins and needles in my legs from the cramped position, and this constant ache in my lower back that never really went away no matter how I tried to stretch or position myself. In the winter months, I would wake up with frost covering the inside of the windows, and my breath would be visible in the frigid air. During the summer, I would sweat completely through my clothes and have to change shirts in gas station bathrooms before going to work or class. The physical discomfort was terrible, but honestly, the loneliness was almost worse than the physical misery. I would go entire days without having a real conversation with another human being. My coworkers at Pep Boys were mostly older guys who kept to themselves and didn't really socialize with the young part-timer. Food delivery was just me, my car, and a bunch of drunk college kids who barely acknowledged my existence when they grabbed their orders from my hands. I would sit in my car at Target and watch families walking in and out of the store. Parents with their kids, everyone looking normal and happy and like they belonged somewhere. I would wonder what I had done wrong in my life to end up sleeping in a parking lot at 18 years old while other kids my age were starting college, making friends, going to parties, and having all the normal experiences that come with being young. Meanwhile, I was calculating whether I could afford both gas and food for the week, or if I needed to choose between the two. My grades at community college started to suffer because I was constantly exhausted from working so many hours and getting such poor sleep. I would fall asleep during morning classes because I'd been up until 2 a.m. delivering pizzas to drunk college students. I would show up late to class because I'd overslept in my car and had to find somewhere to clean up and make myself presentable before walking into the classroom. My professors would give me these disapproving looks, like I was just another lazy student who didn't care about his education or future. If only they knew that I was working 80 hours a week just to survive and keep myself enrolled in their classes. Meanwhile, Tyler was posting constant Instagram stories from his college experience, parties, football games, spring break trips that my parents were funding. His captions were always things like college life and #blessed. He would post pictures of himself on beaches that I couldn't afford to visit even in my wildest dreams. And the comments were always full of high school friends saying how jealous they were and how lucky he was to have such supportive parents who made all these experiences possible. Everything changed on a Wednesday night in October during my second year of living this absolutely miserable routine. I was having one of those nights where absolutely everything that could go wrong did go wrong. 3 different delivery orders got canceled at the last minute, which meant I'd wasted gas driving to places where nobody was going to pay me. My car had overheated twice during my shift, forcing me to pull over and wait for the engine to cool down while I watched my potential earnings disappear. I was running on maybe 4 hours of sleep from the night before, and my body felt like it was running on fumes and pure stubbornness. My last delivery of the night was to this fancy office building downtown, where some law firm called Brennan and Associates was apparently having a late-night strategy session. They had ordered something like $180 worth of pizza and sides, which was easily the biggest order of my entire shift. I was actually excited about this delivery because the tip was going to help me afford groceries for the week, instead of living exclusively on gas station hot dogs and whatever free samples I could find. I was juggling probably 6 insulated delivery bags and trying not to trip over my own feet when this guy in an incredibly expensive suit walked out of the elevator. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw me, doing this obvious double take like he was seeing a ghost or something impossible. "Holy shit, Derek," he said, and I looked up from my armload of food containers and nearly dropped everything I was carrying. It was my father's older brother Vincent, Uncle Vincent, who had supposedly abandoned the family when I was around 8 years old. According to my dad's version of events, Vincent was a show-off who thought he was better than everyone else in the family and had probably gotten his money through shady deals or questionable business practices. The last time I had actually seen Uncle Vincent was at some family barbecue when I was just a kid, and I barely remembered him except that he drove a really nice car and my parents always got weird and tense whenever he was around. "Uncle Vincent," I stammered, feeling like a complete idiot standing there in my grease-stained Tony's Pizza polo shirt. He was obviously older than I remembered, but everything about him absolutely screamed success and wealth. The suit he was wearing probably cost more than I made in 6 months of working both my jobs. His watch was definitely a Rolex, and he had that confident posture that comes from being someone who owns things instead of owing money to people. Even his haircut looked like it had cost more than most people spend on groceries. "Jesus Christ, kid, you're delivering food now?" He looked genuinely shocked. Like running into me, there was literally the last thing he had expected to encounter in the world. "Yeah, just, working my way through school." I tried to sound casual about it, but standing there next to my uncle who looked like he belonged on the cover of Business Week magazine was pretty humiliating, to say the least. "Working your way through school," he repeated the phrase slowly, like he was trying to process something that didn't make any logical sense to him. "What school are you attending?" "Ocean View Community College. It's not much, but it's what I can afford on my own," I replied honestly. His expression changed completely when I said that, getting harder and almost angry, like I had just told him something that genuinely pissed him off. "And your parents know that you're—" He gestured broadly at my uniform, the bags of food I was carrying, and my beat-up Honda parked illegally in the loading zone with the hazard lights blinking. I just shrugged my shoulders because what was I supposed to say? They've got their hands full with Tyler's college stuff, soccer scholarships and all that important business. Something shifted dramatically in his facial expression when I mentioned Tyler. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet, then handed me a business card. This wasn't just any business card. This thing was thick, heavy cardstock with embossed gold lettering that probably cost more to print than most people spend on lunch. It read, "Vincent Russo, CEO, Russo Holdings Group," in elegant script. "Come see me tomorrow at 10 a.m., he said, and his voice was completely different now, much more serious and businesslike. "And Derek, don't tell your parents that we talked tonight." That night I couldn't sleep, and it wasn't just because I was back in my usual spot behind Target trying to get comfortable in the backseat of my Honda. I kept staring at that business card, using the McDonald's Wi-Fi on my cracked phone screen to Google search his company and learn more about what my uncle had actually accomplished. Russo Holdings Group was absolutely huge. Like really, seriously huge. They owned 12 different companies spanning restaurants, real estate development, construction, and even a small chain of fitness centers. According to the Business Journal articles I found online, Uncle Vincent had started with a single pizza place about 25 years ago and had built it into this incredible empire. Forbes magazine estimated his net worth at somewhere north of $40 million. This was the same Uncle Vincent that my dad always called a lucky bastard, who probably doesn't even remember where he came from anymore. I barely slept that night, and it wasn't just my usual discomfort from trying to fold myself into the backseat of my Honda. I kept wondering if this encounter was actually real, or if I was finally having some kind of mental breakdown from exhaustion and malnutrition. Uncle Vincent's office was located in this impressive glass tower downtown that I had driven past literally thousands of times during my food delivery routes. But I had never imagined I would actually enter the building, let alone take the elevator to the top floors. The lobby was absolutely incredible. Marble floors that probably cost more than most people's cars, a waterfall wall that looked like something from a luxury resort, and the kind of modern art installations that cost more than most people's annual salaries. I felt like I had stepped into a completely different universe from the one I'd been living in. The receptionist was this perfectly put-together woman who was polite, but clearly confused about why someone wearing thrift store khakis and scuffed shoes was there, claiming to have an appointment with the CEO. "Mr. Russo is expecting you," she said, like she couldn't quite believe the words that were coming out of her own mouth. The elevator ride to the 30th floor felt like ascending to heaven, or some other realm that existed far above the world where I delivered pizza and slept in parking lots. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into what looked like something straight out of a movie. Vincent's office took up half of the entire floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that provided a panoramic view of the whole city spread out below. The furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything was clearly expensive and chosen by someone with impeccable taste. There was this massive mahogany desk that probably weighed more than my entire car, and everything in the room conveyed power, success, and wealth. He was in the middle of a phone call when I walked in, discussing numbers that made my head spin with their size. "Tell them we'll go to $2.8 million, but not a penny more," he was saying into his phone. "No, I don't care what their counteroffer is. That's my final number." "Fine, walk away then. There's always another deal waiting." He hung up and looked at me for a long moment, really studying my face like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "Sit down, Derek. You want some coffee?" he asked. "Sure," I replied, my voice cracking slightly like I was 13 years old again. He had this incredibly fancy espresso machine in the corner of his office and made me a cup that tasted better than anything I had ever experienced in my life. It probably cost more per ounce than I usually spent on food in an entire day. "So," he said, settling back into his expensive leather chair, "tell me what's really going on with your situation." "What do you mean?" I asked, genuinely confused about what he was getting at. "I mean, why is my nephew delivering pizza at midnight instead of being in college like a normal 20-year-old? And don't give me that working my way through school bullshit. I've been around long enough to spot desperation when I see it, and kid, you absolutely reek of it." So I told him everything. The blatant favoritism throughout my entire childhood. Tyler's completely free ride through college while I was expected to figure everything out on my own. Sleeping in my car behind Target, working 80 hours a week just to afford ramen noodles and gas station hot dogs. I explained how I hadn't had a real conversation with my parents in months, and how they treated me like I was an embarrassment to the family name rather than their actual son. Vincent's expression got darker and darker as I continued talking. By the time I finished explaining my situation, he looked genuinely angry. "Those sons of bitches," he muttered under his breath. "Your father always was a jealous, small-minded prick, but I didn't think he would take his resentment out on his own kid." "What do you mean by that?" I asked. Vincent leaned back in his chair and stared out the window for a moment, like he was deciding how much to tell me about the family history I had never heard. "Your dad and I had a major falling out about 20 years ago," he began. "I was just starting out back then, had this little pizza place that was doing surprisingly well. I offered him a partnership in the business. Would have made him genuinely rich if he had stuck with it and trusted the process. But he was too proud and too stubborn. Said he didn't need handouts from his show-off little brother. He turned back to face me directly. Then, when I started making real money and expanding the business into other areas, he got bitter and resentful. Started telling everyone who would listen that I was probably laundering money or screwing over my business partners. Just classic jealous older brother behavior, you know?" Vincent stood up and walked over to the massive windows, looking out at the city below. "The truth is, I worked my ass off for everything I have. I started with absolutely nothing, just like you're doing right now. I slept on a friend's couch for 2 years, ate ramen noodles every single day, wore the same 3 shirts until they literally fell apart. The only difference between me and you is that I had people who believed in my potential when it really mattered." He turned back to me with an expression I had never seen from anyone in my family, like he was seeing potential and possibilities instead of problems and disappointments. "How would you like to work for me?" I nearly choked on my expensive coffee. "Work for you? Doing what exactly?" "Learning the business from the ground up. I've got 3 different companies that could use someone young and hungry who's willing to work hard and pay attention. You'd start at the bottom, obviously. Filing paperwork, data entry, answering phones, basic administrative stuff. But if you prove yourself and show me that you've got what it takes to succeed, the sky's the limit." He named a starting salary that made my head spin. $550 a week, plus full health insurance and paid time off. That was significantly more than I was making while working 80 hours across 2 different jobs. "Why would you do this for me?" I asked, still not quite believing this was really happening. Vincent smiled, but it wasn't entirely a happy expression. Because your parents are about to learn a very important lesson about what happens when you throw away something valuable just because you can't see its worth. I started working the following Monday at Russo Construction, which was one of Uncle Vincent's companies. My official title was Operations Assistant, but really, I was just trying to absorb everything I could without making a complete fool of myself. The first few weeks felt like trying to drink from a fire hose. There was so much to learn about construction terminology, building codes, permit processes, vendor relationships, and safety regulations. Everything was completely new to me. But for the first time in my life, I had people who were actually teaching me valuable skills instead of just expecting me to figure everything out on my own. My supervisor was this experienced guy named Carlos, who had been working with Vincent for about 15 years and had worked his way up from carrying tools on job sites to running entire construction projects. "Your uncle doesn't hire family members," he told me on my very first day. "So if you're here, it's because he sees something special in you. Don't make him look stupid for giving you this opportunity." I threw myself into the work like my entire future depended on it, because honestly, it did. I stayed late every single day, asked what probably seemed like a million questions, and volunteered for weekend projects whenever they were available. I spent my evenings reading construction manuals and industry publications, trying to understand every aspect of the business. Within 6 months, I was managing small residential renovation contracts completely on my own. Within a full year, Vincent moved me over to the real estate development side of his business empire. And that's where things got really interesting and profitable. Vincent owned approximately 180 rental properties scattered throughout the city. Plus, he was constantly buying rundown houses, renovating them, and flipping them for substantial profits. The profit margins were absolutely insane when you understood what you were doing and had the right connections. "Real estate isn't really about the properties themselves," Vincent explained to me one day, as we walked through a house we had just purchased for $72,000. "It's about understanding people, what they want, what they can afford, what they think they deserve. Master that psychology, and you can make money in any market condition." He was absolutely right about that. We would buy these beat-up houses in decent neighborhoods and put somewhere between $22,000 to $28,000 into renovations. New kitchen appliances and cabinets, updated bathrooms with modern fixtures, fresh paint throughout, and decent flooring. 6 months later, we would sell them for anywhere from $140,000 to $165,000. If you could do that 5 or 6 times per year, you were looking at serious money that most people couldn't even imagine. But Vincent taught me something even more valuable than how to flip houses for profit. He taught me how to think like a businessman instead of like an employee. He showed me how to see opportunities instead of just problems, and how to make money work for me instead of the other way around. By my second year working with him, I had saved up enough money to start doing small renovation projects on my own, with Vincent as a silent partner providing guidance and additional funding when needed. My first solo project netted me $31,000 in profit. My second project brought in $44,000. I was making more money in 6 months than I used to make in 2 full years of working 80-hour weeks at my previous jobs. And I was finally learning to live like someone who had money instead of someone who was constantly broke and desperate. I got myself a decent apartment. Nothing incredibly fancy, but it had reliable heating and air conditioning, and I didn't have to worry about getting mugged in the parking lot every night. I bought some clothes that didn't come from Target clearance racks, and I got my car properly fixed so it didn't sound like a lawnmower having an asthma attack every time I started the engine. But the best part wasn't even the money, as crazy as that might sound. It was the respect I was finally getting from people. Workers at job sites actually listened when I spoke and asked for my opinions on projects. Contractors started remembering my name and giving me better deals because they knew I was serious about the business and would continue to bring them work. Suppliers treated me like a valued customer instead of some kid they could ignore or overcharge. For the first time in my life, I felt like I actually mattered, like I had real value beyond just being someone's disappointing son or the kid who couldn't get his life together. I had completely cut off all contact with my biological family by this point. I changed my phone number, moved to a different part of town, and didn't even send Christmas cards. As far as I was concerned, I was an orphan who happened to have a very successful uncle who actually gave a damn about my future and potential. By my 4th year working with Vincent, I was making what most people would consider stupid money. Not just good money, but genuinely stupid amounts of money. I had bought and successfully flipped 21 different houses, built up a portfolio of 7 rental properties that provided steady monthly income, and started my own small construction company that specialized in high-end bathroom and kitchen renovations for wealthy clients. My personal net worth had actually hit 7 figures, which still doesn't feel completely real when I think about it. I moved into a penthouse apartment downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and an incredible view of the river. I bought myself a BMW M3, not least like my father's pathetic status symbol, but purchased outright with cash because I actually could afford it. I started getting custom suits tailored instead of wearing off-the-rack garbage, and I began eating at restaurants where the waiters know your name and the wine costs more than I used to make in an entire month. But I kept a relatively low profile about my success. No flashy social media posts, no showing off at bars, no buying stupid expensive toys just to impress people I didn't care about. Vincent had taught me that real wealth whispers while fake wealth shouts, and that people who actually matter can tell the difference between genuine success and desperate posturing. I learned how to make my money work for me through smart investments, diversified stock portfolios, and strategic business partnerships. I started a second company doing property management for other real estate investors and got involved in commercial real estate development projects. Every year, my income grew exponentially because I wasn't just working for money anymore. My money was actively working for me and generating more wealth. The crazy part about achieving this level of success was seeing how dramatically different people treated me once they figured out that I had serious money. The same types of people who used to look right through me when I was delivering food and sleeping in my car suddenly wanted to be my best friend. Women who wouldn't have given me the time of day when I was struggling started showing genuine interest in getting to know me better. Business owners who used to treat me like an annoying interruption started returning my phone calls immediately and going out of their way to accommodate my requests. It was educational in a really depressing way to see how much of human interaction is based purely on perceived status and wealth, rather than actual character or personality. But I was finally on the right side of that equation, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good to have that kind of social power and influence. Meanwhile, through Vincent's extensive business connections throughout the city, I was able to keep tabs on my biological family's situation. And let me tell you, the ongoing disaster was absolutely delicious to watch unfold. Tyler had graduated from college with a generic business degree and absolutely zero real-world skills or work experience beyond playing mediocre soccer for 4 years. It turns out that spending 4 years partying and doing the absolute minimum academically doesn't actually prepare you for adult life in any meaningful way. He had bounced between 5 different entry-level jobs in just 2 years, getting fired from each one for consistently showing up late, calling in sick constantly, or just generally being an entitled brat who expected praise and recognition for completing basic tasks that any competent employee should be able to handle without supervision. My parents were still financially supporting him, of course, paying his rent on a crappy studio apartment, covering his car payment, buying his groceries, and even giving him spending money for dates and entertainment like he was still a teenager. But their own financial situation was getting stretched increasingly thin. My father's insurance business was struggling badly because it turns out nobody wants to buy insurance policies from a guy who drives an 11-year-old BMW with visible rust spots and wears suits that obviously came from a discount rack. The whole fake it till you make it strategy only works if you eventually actually make something of yourself, and he never managed to reach that point. My mother's little boutique clothing store had gone completely under during the COVID pandemic and never recovered from the economic impact. She was now working part-time at Target, which had to be absolutely humiliating for someone who used to brag constantly to all her church friends about being a successful business owner and entrepreneur. Tyler had applied for jobs at probably half the companies in town, including several businesses that regularly did contracting work with my construction company. Word travels fast in business circles, especially in a city this size, and Tyler's reputation for being unreliable and entitled had spread throughout the professional community. He was basically unemployable in any field that required actual responsibility or accountability. That's when Uncle Vincent came to me with an opportunity that was almost too perfect to pass up. "Your brother just applied for a job at the restaurant," he told me over dinner one evening. "Assistant manager position, $28,000 a year." I didn't realize the family connection until I saw the last name on his application. I nearly choked on my expensive steak. "What did you tell them?" I asked. Vincent grinned like a shark who had just spotted wounded prey. "That we'd get back to him about his application." That's when the absolutely perfect, beautiful, and devastating idea hit me. A plan that would teach my family exactly what happens when you treat people like garbage for 20 years and then suddenly need their help. Uncle Vincent, I said slowly, the plan forming in my mind. How would you feel about helping me give them a lesson they'll never forget? The plan was elegant in its simplicity and brutally effective in its execution. I had built up extensive connections throughout the city by this point. Contractors, business owners, real estate agents, bank managers, and influential people in various industries. Vincent had even more connections than I did, plus 25 years of accumulated favors he could call in when necessary. We were going to systematically destroy my family's life piece by piece, and they would never even realize it was happening until it was far too late to do anything about it. It started with Tyler's job search. I made sure that every single application he submitted got quietly rejected. Not obviously or in a way that would look coordinated, but a subtle word here and there about an unreliable candidate, or someone who might not be a good cultural fit for our company, was enough to get him effectively blacklisted from pretty much every decent job opportunity in town. Next, I had my real estate connections ensure that my parents' house appraisal came in way lower than they had expected when they tried to refinance their mortgage to get some financial relief. Nothing illegal or unethical, just professional opinions that their outdated kitchen, old HVAC system, and years of deferred maintenance really hurt the property's market value. Their refinancing application got denied, leaving them stuck with a high-interest mortgage they could barely afford on their declining income. Then there was Tyler's girlfriend Ashley, who it turned out worked at a marketing firm that did advertising campaigns for several of my companies. Small world, right? After a few casual conversations over coffee, I learned that Ashley was getting pretty fed up with financially supporting a grown man who couldn't hold down a job and spent his days playing video games while she worked 50-hour weeks trying to build her career. I didn't have to do much manipulation there, just be a sympathetic ear and provide a little encouragement in the right direction. You know, Ashley, you seem like you've really got your life together. You deserve someone who matches your level of ambition and drive. A little encouragement toward recognizing her own worth, and she ended up dumping Tyler for a guy with an actual career and his own apartment. Within just 4 months, my family was in complete freefall. Tyler was unemployed, single, and living in his childhood bedroom again like a complete loser. My parents were 3 months behind on their mortgage payments and facing foreclosure. My father's business was hemorrhaging the few clients he had left, and my mother was working extra shifts at Target just to keep the electricity on. But the best part of my revenge was still coming. I was having lunch at this upscale steakhouse downtown, enjoying a perfectly cooked $42 ribeye and reviewing some property investment documents, when I spotted a familiar figure hesitantly approaching my table. It was my father, looking like he had aged about 15 years in just the past 6 months. His cheap suit was wrinkled and hung too loosely on his frame. Stress had clearly caused him to lose a significant amount of weight. His face was gaunt, his hair was going gray at an alarming rate, and he had that unmistakable desperate look of a man who had completely run out of options. "Derek," he said tentatively, like he wasn't entirely sure it was actually me sitting there. "Jesus, son, you look successful." I looked up from my expensive meal like I was seeing a complete stranger who had randomly wandered over to my table. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" I asked, with genuine confusion in my voice. The color completely drained from his face. "It's me, your father, Richard Wilson." "Wilson," I pretended to think about it carefully, taking another deliberate bite of my steak. "Doesn't ring a bell. Are you absolutely sure you have the right person?" "Derek, please." His voice actually cracked a little. "I know we haven't talked in a while, but we're family. We really need to talk." I made a big show of checking my Rolex, a $12,000 submariner that cost more than he used to make in 6 months of selling insurance policies. "I've got maybe 5 minutes before my next business meeting. What do you need?" He sat down without being invited, looking around nervously at the restaurant's atmosphere. The other diners were well-dressed business people and wealthy retirees, exactly the kind of people who used to intimidate the hell out of him when he was pretending to be more successful than he actually was. We're going through a really rough patch right now," he said quietly, clearly embarrassed to be asking for help. "Tyler can't seem to find work anywhere he applies. We're behind on the house payments, and I heard through Vincent that you've done extremely well for yourself financially." "Vincent Russo?" I raised an eyebrow with interest. "Yeah, he's been like a father to me, really. Stepped up and believed in my potential when my actual family decided I wasn't worth their time or investment." My father flinched like I had physically slapped him across the face. "Derek, we made mistakes, we know that now," he said desperately. But we're still family, and family helps family when times get tough. I actually laughed out loud at that statement, and several people at nearby tables turned to look at our conversation. Family helps family. That's absolutely rich, Richard. Where exactly was that philosophy when I was sleeping in my car behind Target? Where was family loyalty when I was working 80 hours a week just to afford ramen noodles and gas station hot dogs? We didn't know it was that bad for you, he protested weakly. You didn't care enough to know, I replied coldly. There's a huge difference between not knowing and not caring enough to find out. My phone buzzed with a text message from my assistant. Perfect timing for this conversation. I have to go, business calls, you understand? I stood up and pulled out my wallet, making sure he could see how thick it was with cash. I dropped 2 crisp $100 bills on the table. That should cover lunch, I said loud enough for nearby tables to hear clearly. Consider it charity. I walked away without looking back, but I could feel him watching me leave, probably trying to process how his failure of a son was now the kind of person who tips more money than he makes in an entire day. Over the next few weeks, they got increasingly desperate in their attempts to contact me. My mother started showing up at my apartment building, crying to the doorman about how she just needed to see her son and explain how sorry they all were. The doorman, who I tipped very generously every Christmas, politely told her that I wasn't available and suggested she make an appointment through proper channels. Tyler sent me long, rambling text messages about how sorry he was for everything, how he had always looked up to me as his big brother, and how he just needed one chance to prove that he could change and become a better person. I deleted every single message without bothering to respond. My father tried to corner me outside of Vincent's office building, which resulted in building security escorting him out of the premises. That was probably the most humiliating thing that had ever happened to him in his entire life. Getting physically manhandled by security guards in front of a lobby full of successful business people and potential clients. But the absolute best part of my revenge came when all 3 of them showed up at my favorite coffee shop at the same time. It was like they had coordinated this ambush, which they probably had after exhausting all their other options. They looked like refugees from their own former lives. My mother was already crying before she even started talking. My father was sweating through his shirt despite the air conditioning. And Tyler looked like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. "Derek, please," my mother sobbed, literally falling to her knees next to my table in front of the entire coffee shop. "We'll do anything. We know we messed up terribly, but you can't just abandon your family like this. We raised you, we fed you, we put a roof over your head for 18 years. I sipped my $6 artisanal latte and looked at them like they were panhandlers who had wandered in off the street looking for spare change. The other customers were definitely starting to stare at this dramatic scene unfolding, which made the whole situation even more perfect from my perspective. "See, here's the thing," I said with complete calm. "You had 20 years to be my family. 20 years to show me that I mattered, that I was worth something, that you gave a damn whether I lived or died. Instead, you chose to treat me like an inconvenience while worshiping the ground Tyler walked on." "But we're choosing now," Tyler interrupted desperately. "We want to make it right. We know we screwed up badly." "Oh, now you want to make it right." I stood up and they all scrambled backward like I was going to physically attack them. "Now that I have money, now that I can solve your problems, now you suddenly remember you have another son." I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo from the business journal. Me and Vincent at a charity gala the month before, both of us wearing $2,500 tuxedos, surrounded by the mayor, several city council members, and the kind of people who make decisions that affect entire industries and thousands of jobs. "See this photo? These are my people now," I said, holding the phone so they could all see clearly. "This is my real family. These are people who believed in me when you couldn't be bothered to learn my middle name. These are people who saw potential in me when all you saw was an inconvenience and a disappointment." My mother was sobbing even harder now, her makeup running down her face in dark streaks. "We're going to lose everything. The house, everything we worked for our entire lives. We'll be homeless." I nodded with fake sympathy, like I was genuinely concerned about their situation. "That really sucks for you," I said matter-of-factly. "But you know what? I lost my family 20 years ago when you decided that Tyler was worth everything and I was worth absolutely nothing. Somehow I managed to survive that loss. I'm sure you'll figure out how to survive this too." The entire coffee shop had gone completely silent. Every single person was staring at this train wreck unfolding in the corner booth, and I was putting on quite a show for them. I was loving every single second of their public humiliation. "Please," my father whispered, his voice barely audible above the background noise. "We're begging you. We know we were wrong about everything. We'll make it up to you however you want. We'll do whatever you ask." Just please, help us save the house. I pretended to consider his desperate plea for a moment, tapping my finger thoughtfully on my chin like I was deep in contemplation about their request. Then I smiled. Not a nice, warm smile, but the kind of predatory smile a shark gives right before it bites. "You know what? I'll help you," I announced. Their faces immediately lit up with hope and relief. It was absolutely beautiful to watch that moment of desperate optimism. "I'll help you the exact same way you helped me when I was sleeping in my car and eating gas station hot dogs for dinner every night," I continued, pausing for dramatic effect. "I'll give you the same support, the same encouragement, the same love and attention you gave me for 20 years. The hope died completely in their eyes as they began to realize what I was actually saying. Which is to say, I'll do absolutely nothing for you. You're on your own, just like I was. I started walking toward the door, then turned back one final time. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The perfect ending to my perfect revenge. "Oh, and Tyler, remember that marketing firm where your ex-girlfriend Ashley works? The one that does advertising campaigns for local businesses?" I grinned with genuine satisfaction. "I bought that company last month. Paid cash for it. $1.1 million. Ashley's actually my director of client relations now. Got her a nice raise and a company car. She speaks very highly of her new boyfriend, by the way. Seems like a real go-getter with actual ambition." Tyler's face went completely white. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no sound came out. "And Dad, that big construction project downtown, the one your insurance company was hoping to get the contract for," I continued. "That's my building. I decided to go with a different insurance provider. Someone more reliable and professional." My father looked like he was going to be physically sick. "Mom, I heard Target's cutting employee hours again due to budget constraints. Tough break, but hey, maybe Tyler can get a job there too if they're hiring. Which I seriously doubt, given his employment history." I walked toward the door one final time, but stopped right at the entrance and turned around to address the entire coffee shop. Not just my pathetic excuse for a family. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said loud enough for everyone to hear clearly, "I'd like you all to meet my biological family. The same people who thought I wasn't worth investing in. Who kicked me out at 18 while fully funding my brother's college lifestyle. Who let me sleep in my car while he got spending money for spring break trips." The entire place was dead silent now, with every single person staring at the three sobbing figures huddled by my former table. They're here today because they've hit some serious financial trouble and suddenly remembered they have another son. Funny how money has a way of jogging people's memory about family obligations. I pulled out one of my business cards, the same thick, expensive cardstock that Vincent had given me years ago when he first offered me a chance. "If anyone here is looking for construction work, real estate investment opportunities, or just wants to do business with someone who actually values loyalty and hard work, give me a call." I tossed the card on a nearby table and walked out, leaving them there in their puddle of shame and desperation. I could hear my mother wailing behind me, but I didn't look back. That night, I called Vincent and told him about the whole beautiful disaster that had unfolded at the coffee shop. He laughed so hard I thought he was going to choke on his expensive whiskey. "Your father always was a piece of shit," he said when he finally caught his breath. "But seeing him get exactly what he deserved? That's absolutely priceless." "What happened to them after that public humiliation?" I asked. "They lost the house 3 weeks later," Vincent replied with satisfaction. "Your dad's business went completely under. Turns out nobody wants to buy insurance from someone who can't even manage his own finances. Last I heard, they were all living in some sketchy apartment complex across town. Tyler's working part-time at a gas station. Your mom's still at Target, but they cut her hours significantly, and your dad's been desperately trying to get meetings with anyone who'll listen, trying to rebuild his non-existent client base." Vincent paused to take another sip of his drink. "Too bad word gets around quickly in business circles about people you can't trust or rely on. The crazy thing is, I don't feel even the slightest bit guilty about any of it. Not even a little bit. Some people might say I went too far, that family is family, and you should forgive and forget past mistakes. But those people probably never had to choose between buying gas or buying food. They probably never fell asleep in a car behind a Target parking lot, wondering what they had done wrong to deserve being treated like garbage by the people who were supposed to love them unconditionally. You want to know what I learned from all of this? Family isn't about blood or genetics. It's about who actually shows up when your life is falling apart. It's about who believes in you when you don't even believe in yourself. It's about who sees your potential when everyone else only sees your problems and shortcomings. Vincent saw a scared, hungry kid delivering pizza at midnight and decided to give him a real chance at success. My biological parents saw that same desperate kid and decided he wasn't worth their time, energy, or investment. I think it's pretty obvious which approach worked out better for everyone involved. These days, I'm doing better than I ever imagined possible when I was sleeping in that Honda Civic behind Target. My net worth is rapidly approaching 8 figures, which still feels surreal when I think about where I started. I own investment properties in 3 different states, generating passive income every month. I employ over 200 people across my various companies, and every single one of them knows that hard work and loyalty get rewarded generously. Because I remember exactly what it feels like to be overlooked and undervalued by the people who should have supported you. I remember what it feels like to be genuinely hungry, both literally and figuratively. I remember the desperation of not knowing where your next meal is coming from or whether you'll have enough gas money to get to work tomorrow. Those memories keep me grounded and remind me to treat my employees with the respect and dignity that I never received from my own family. Sometimes I'll drive past that Target where I used to sleep in my car, just to remind myself how far I've come and how much my life has changed. Sometimes I'll see families at restaurants and wonder if the parents realize how much psychological damage they can inflict by playing obvious favorites among their children. I wonder how much potential they might be wasting by writing off the kid who doesn't fit their narrow expectations or predetermined ideas about success. But mostly, I just focus on continuing to build the business empire that Vincent started and making sure that everyone who works for me knows their value and feels appreciated. Because I learned the hard way that success isn't just about accumulating money and assets. It's about proving to yourself that you're worth more than other people thought you were. It's about building something meaningful that creates opportunities for other people too. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's about making sure that the people who threw you away like garbage get to watch you succeed from the outside, where they belong, while they deal with the consequences of their own terrible choices. Sometimes I wonder if they drive past my office building downtown and think about what could have been different if they had just treated me like I mattered. Sometimes I wonder if they see my name in the business section of the newspaper and feel any regret about how they handled things. But honestly, I don't really care what they think anymore. Their opinions stopped mattering to me the day I realized that the only person's approval I really needed was my own. The best part about achieving this level of success is that it's opened doors I never even knew existed. I serve on the boards of 3 different charities focused on helping at-risk youth and young adults who are aging out of the foster care system. I've established a scholarship fund at the community college I attended, specifically for students who are working multiple jobs to pay their own way through school. Every year, I help a dozen kids who remind me of myself avoid the trap of sleeping in their cars and choosing between gas money and food. Vincent always told me that real wealth isn't just about what you accumulate for yourself. It's about what you can do for other people who are in the same situation you used to be in. He was right about that. Just like he was right about everything else he taught me about business and life, I've also learned that success is the best possible revenge, but only when the people who wronged you are forced to witness it firsthand. There's something incredibly satisfying about knowing that every time my father tries to network or rebuild his client base, someone in the business community knows exactly who he is and what kind of person he really is. There's something poetic about my mother working retail at the same store where I used to sleep in the parking lot, wondering how her life went so completely off the rails. And Tyler? Well, Tyler learned that being the favorite child doesn't actually prepare you for adult life when your parents can't afford to support you anymore. He learned that charm and good looks only get you so far when you don't have any real skills or work ethic to back them up. He learned that the world doesn't owe you anything just because your parents convinced you that you were special. Anyway, that's my story. The kid they threw away became the man they begged to save them. And honestly, it feels pretty incredible. Sometimes the best revenge really is just living well and proving everyone wrong. But sometimes the best revenge is living well and making absolutely sure they know about it. Watching from the sidelines as you build the life they never thought you were capable of achieving. The family that spent 20 years teaching me that I wasn't worth their investment learned the hard way that they had thrown away something valuable. They just didn't realize it until it was far too late to do anything about it. And that, my friends, is exactly how karma is supposed to work.